Hello, dear listener, and welcome or Jingiwala to the Indigenous Governance Podcast, a Trans-Tasman collaboration between Australian Indigenous Governance Institute, or AIGI, and the Community Governance Aotearoa. I am Regina Rogers. I am a proud freshwater Wiradjuri woman with strong ties to this beautiful saltwater Bundjalung nation. I am the CEO of AIGI, and AIGI is the Indigenous-led centre dedicated to advancing governance, knowledge and excellence, empowering our First Nations peoples through world-class resources and professional development.
Kia ora koutou, ko waio, he uri tēnei no Ngāti Porou, te aitanga mahaki, rungu whakaata me Ngāti Kahungunu. Ko Rosanna Hiha tōku ingoa, ko tūmu whakarai o Community Governance Aotearoa. Community Governance Aotearoa supports and strengthens not-for-profit organisations across the community and voluntary sector. This includes iwi Māori entities and organisations. We lead kaupapa that supports great sector governance leadership in Aotearoa.
So before we begin, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands we recorded these episodes from and pay our respects to our elders past and present across all the beautiful lands where our listeners are joining us from today.
He puna mātauranga kia ora ai te tangata, a source of knowledge to enlighten and sustain our people. At Community Governance Aotearoa, we honour the wisdom of those who came before us, the lived knowledge of today, and our responsibility to those who follow. Tēnā te mihi nui.
So in this podcast series, we're honoured to hear from the Indigenous governance leaders and experts as they explore Indigenous governance, nation building, and the pathways towards stronger, self-determined futures. We recognise that Māori and Australian First Nations communities bring a distinct histories, protocols, governing traditions, and lived experiences. So by learning from one another, we aim to support governance practices that reflect the unique contexts, priorities, and strengths of our communities. Through open conversation between peers, the series shares real experiences, cultural insights, and practical lessons from leaders who work within their communities.
Together, these conversations offer a powerful look at how Indigenous communities are strengthening governance and building futures grounded in culture, community, and self-determination. Enjoy the series.
Kia ora, Daniel. Cool to be here with you having this kōrero, this talk around our kind of experiences within the governance space and within our Indigenous communities. A bit about me. Ko putua ki te maunga, ko rangatai ki te awa, ko mātātua te waka, ko Ngāti Awa te iwi, ko ngā maihi te hapu, ko Flavel, ko Kens, ko Hockley, ko Rankin, oku ingoa whānau, ko Taylor Kurd, tōku ingoa. My name's Taylor. I'm from the iwi, the tribe Ngāti Awa, which is in the east coast of Aotearoa, New Zealand, which is near Whakatane. I grew up not far from there in Pāpāmoa, in Tauranga Moana, and I now live in Wellington, which is our capital. I do a bit of volunteering here in Wellington. I work with Volunteer Wellington in our heart office, Te Awa Kairangi. We're looking at Indigenous ways of community engagement, and we also help about 400 nonprofits across the city with their volunteer capacities. I also sit on my iwi's Te Ahi Ka board, which is our iwi's festival, Ngāti Awa Te Tuki, and we've got organising that festival later in the year. Last year, I was the chair and co-chair of the Wellington Pride Festival, which is held in March, and that's an incorporated society, so that brings the queer community, the Pride community together to celebrate and to protest and to do all of the amazing things that we do. I also had a head injury in 2017, and that kind of pulled me into the Māori health space. So I've worked with ACC to help redesign their head injury space and kind of make rongoa services, so Māori healing services, available for all claimants. And that was a really cool process to be a part of. Through my own journey, and I do kapahaka with a takatapui group, Te Whanawhana, part of that whānau, and I do kapahaka with my hapu down this way, Ngāti Awa of Wellington, ki Te Whanganui-a-Tara. Nice to be here. Over to you.
Thanks, Taylor. Thanks for the amazing introduction too. By way of introduction, my name is Daniel Rosendale. I'm a Western Kuki-a-Lungi Gubi of the Man, born and raised here in Gimli, otherwise known as Cairns, Australia. In my work, I'm the co-founder and custodian of Deadly Inspiring Youth Doing Good, which is a youth-led non-for-profit that was founded back in 2016. And we work to support our community in this region, but also around Australia, recognizing that our young people do know what they want to do. They do have passion, they do have power. And we just need to inspire and equip and empower them to really take that charge and take that lead for the next generations. Alongside that, in my full-time role here at DIG, I am also the treasurer of Wood Chopper and Health Service. So much like you, I do dabble in the community-controlled health sector. Is what we call it, the community-controlled health sector. So supporting our community members in places where they're most vulnerable. I've been the treasurer of Wood Chopper for 3 years now, and that's been an amazing experience for myself. Being a young person standing in quite a significant role of governance and community governance of that has always been a huge honour. I also am the treasurer of our Cairns NAIDOC committee. So that's a committee that's been around in Cairns for about 25 years now, delivering events and supporting and enhancing the celebration and pride of our community and our culture within the region. I've done that for about 4 years. And then among other things, I am a co-chair of a research project that's soon to release its final paper, hopefully within the next 2 weeks, which is a roadmap for adolescent health in Aboriginal communities. So really understanding when we look at the next 50 years and we really have a bit of a long-term view on our community, what are the barriers that are affecting health of our young people that aren't directly pinpointed to health? So trying to understand that, to empower not only our own community understanding where we actually probably need to focus some of our health gaps, but how we can actually look at it in different ways. Just other than that, I'm a very proud community member and I love doing all the work I do, and I'm very privileged to be here, so thank you.
Nice to meet you. So what's shaping your own kind of understanding of Indigenous governance at the moment and into the future?
It's an interesting question, I think, because when we look at governance, I'm sure you can reflect in your own community back home too, but we've had such strong leaders that have been holding down and supporting our community for so many years. But you look at those people and they've been in those positions for a very long time. Here in Australia, we're both a very old but also very young population. And so our community, our culture, our history, our law has been going on for thousands and thousands of years. But if you look at the average age of our population, at the moment, we're sitting at about 23 years old. So when I talk about Indigenous leadership and the future, I quite literally look at people that age and say, well, these are the people that are going to be taking on these roles. These are the people that are going to be stepping up in the future. And we need to make sure that as a community, as a people, as organizations and organizational leaders, we're preparing those young people as much as possible now. We're creating those pathways for succession planning because we don't want to step into a place where there's a void when our leaders and our elders step away. What we want is we want them to step away with peace and a sense of contentment because they know that what the legacy they've left behind is going to be picked up full-heartedly and at full speed by a young, passionate person that's ready to work.
I really support that. How have you seen the handover going so far? Because I mean, what I can see at this end, on this side of the ditch, and my kind of experience is that the future is now. You know, the handover has to happen now. And I see it going well in spaces and I see it not going well in spaces. What have you seen?
I completely agree with you. I think in many places we've seen that it should have happened probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where there's no right or there's no correct or incorrect way of doing. But what you recognize is that time is moving and we need to ensure that we're building the best possible pathways now. And if you haven't started yet, you should be starting. I think for us, when we look at the highest levels of the biggest organizations in our communities, we've got people that are extremely knowledgeable and they have the capacity to mentor, they have the capacity to succession plan. I like to look at it in this way, that it's not like us stepping into these positions, people want us to fail. But we need to fail to learn. And the power behind having strong mentors and strong people in governance now is that they can let you learn and then they can guide you through that process. And I think that's the biggest thing when we talk about succession planning. It's not succession planning to take your role or my role and be perfect with it. It's to step into this position and learn from it and create what with it suits you.
Yeah, no, I really like that. I think my experience is I kind of join boards as they're kind of imploding, or as you kind of like grabbing the pieces as as you're kind of continuing. Organizations that have been around for 40 years, and then all of a sudden you get dumped with them. You're like, oh gosh, here we go, everyone, and everyone's new together. That was quite an experience. Otherwise, I've witnessed kind of young people coming into spaces, and even from a Māori perspective as well, Māori coming into spaces and being invited into spaces kind of as a tick box, and then everything kind of continues. And you're not allowed to be young, and you're not allowed to be Māori because there's no kind of space for that. Do you notice things like that?
Absolutely. I think there's two parts of your question I think I want to touch on. I think the first one was really around stepping into our organizations that have been around for decades. And because of whatever reason, you're stepping into it when it's not in the best space. And there's this pressure and expectation that, I'm going to be able to come in and be able to fix it or change it for whatever reason. I think when they look at young people, they think, oh, you're a fresh face, you're a fresh opinion. But you have to have all this responsibility. And it's just like, well, unless this person is experienced in this, unless they've experienced these sorts of issues before, you've got to actually give them grace to have confidence that they will be able to provide a solution and a direction. Absolutely. But also provide them the grace that they are not the person that's going to suddenly make everything work and appear as normal. You got to give these people grace. You got to provide them with those experiences. You can't just expect them to step in and think, okay, I've been in this sort of role in limited capacity. I'm about to fix it.
Yeah. So what would you say is governance to you when you hear that word? What do you think?
I think governance is much probably like your community to mine. Governance is twice pronged. We have our cultural obligations, which in its own sense is a governance model and a way of doing. So when we talk about the governance, our young people are challenged all the time when they step in this place of a westernized governance model, where I am sitting on boards with my respected elders and aunties and uncles. And outside of this, I listen to them and I respect them. But now I'm suddenly sitting on a board, sitting in a board meeting, representing a government body of an organization that services our community, and I don't agree with it. And then the pressure sits with us, and to say, well, I have to now manage not only the fact that from a Western governance perspective, I want to have my input and make sure that I am leading this organization in the correct direction, but also from a cultural perspective, I also got to manage how I'm holding my relationships and respecting my elders and the people that I look up to, because they are the ones that come from, they are the knowledge holders for us, and they are the people that, we listen to and go to. So it is definitely, it's a dance at times. And it's one that I find is quite challenging, but it also is an opportunity to not only learn from our elders, but also to build trust with our elders and make them realize that they can trust us as the next generation stepping in. I'd like to hear your perspective, and from what you touched on your intro. You mentioned quite a few spaces that you sit in and represent, and obviously you're sitting in multiple similar but different sort of spaces where governance, culture, and identity all touch each other. It would be really interesting to see how your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, I guess governance to me is would fall under like kaitiakitanga, so guardianship, I think is the closest. I really don't like translating Māori to English because I've seen when a word like volunteering gets translated in Tūao, which is the Māori word, volunteering has its own whakapapa, its own history, and then Tūao, my understanding is to stand in the world. It's very different from kind of the concept of giving, but guardianship is the closest that I would get to. And guardian of what? And I think, like you say, we're stuck in a Western model, a Pākehā model of primarily my experiences with incorporated societies. And so my understanding as a kaitiaki, you're looking after this entity, that's 40, however many decades old, and you're the current kaitiaki of it. So you're all working together. Everything needs to be written down. It can't be in your heads. It needs to be somewhere physical as well. It exists in a physical space. And so governance to me is the group or the people that are kind of ticking the right boxes, I guess, for the Pākehā. But then where does culture come into it? And the view that I've been given is, if you kind of think of an octopus, you've got the incorporated society. It's the head, which is the model, which the Western framework requires. Then the legs are all of the laws, whether you have an HR law, work law, or you have the Incorporated Societies Act, or other laws that kind of come off it. The cultural values come in as the suction cups, where the organization meets the real world,
Latches on.
And so it's in all of your interpersonal relationships. It's in how you store information, how you look after people, manakitanga. It's the organization is an entity in itself, and legally it is. Governance is kaitiaki, is guardianship of that entity, and you put your culture through your values, where you meet the world and where it interacts with everything else on your path.
That's a really interesting analogy, and I do reflect. It makes sense to me. I guess I look at my organization, DIG, and my title is I am a custodian, in the sense of I am a holder of this place in this organization. It is not mine. I am not an owner of a role or a position. I am merely a person that is holding a space here, recognizing that as a custodian, it doesn't always mean I'm going to have it forever. As a custodian, it is my responsibility, and I have almost inherited this responsibility by the people I serve or the people I work for, which is our community, to do this work. This work may not exist in 5 years as the organization grows and our community changes. So too must the role of what I am custodian to. So I really like that analogy, and I think it's a beautiful one too, because in many ways, every arm of that octopus is autonomous and it moves in its own way. And you've got to be reactive to how it interacts with the world, because every arm has a different touch point and a different way community also reacts back to. So I think it's a really interesting analogy. So thank you for sharing.
No. All good. I'll ask you my next question, which is, through your experience in deadly inspiring youth doing good, which amplifies the voices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, how do you see young leaders shaping governance today?
Well, I reflect, I'll go back to being a co-founder. Co-founder for me was I was also the first treasurer and also the youngest board member of our organisation when we incorporated back in 2016. At 18 years old, I became the treasurer of DIG. And my next question after being nominated as treasurer was, what does a treasurer do?
what did you do in that situation? Because that's a big job.
Yeah. But I wasn't the only one. I was very lucky enough to have, obviously, all of us. We were a collective of young people, and there was absolute truths. We were passionate, we were positive, and we wanted to make change. We didn't necessarily have the expertise, but we had the determination, the passion, and the drive to make it happen. So when we put ourselves into these positions, we were obviously lucky in the sense that I was a treasurer of, a newly founded organization. Luckily, we had no money. We were, those sorts. Of, I could rely on the growth, right? But for someone who was 18, stepping into the space, and we all, at 18 years old, had no real direction of where. I knew I wanted to do good things. I knew I wanted to eventually go to university, but I never imagined that I'd be co-founded an organization that 10 years on is still servicing and has grown and supported the community. It's a great journey, but I knew that I would be taking away a lot of experience and learnings. And because I, at that young age, had the experience and the support to step into a place of extreme uncomfortability, to learn something new and learn some new skills, I am where I am now, where I'm able to support community on many different fronts. So when I think on this question about young people, leadership and governance, I think it's very important that we give opportunities to throw our young people into the deep end. But we've got to be able to support that.
Yeah, I support that. I is definitely baptism by fire as well. And, you're kind of thrown in it and you're like, oh my gosh, let me research everything I can about an incorporated society now that I lead one.
Yeah.
And what do all these things do, And
first Google search was, what does a treasurer do?
I hope it gave you all the answers you needed.
I'm still here, so...
Yeah. And so is the org, Preston.
Yeah. But it's one of those things, and it goes back to what I said before, is it reflects on supporting any future leader into any leadership position. Is we want them to step into these positions, but we don't want them to feel like if they fail, they're going to fail alone. We want to be able to support them to step into these positions and support them, let them make mistakes, but also guide them through those mistakes and say, well, this is the pressure of leadership. This is the pressure of governance. This is how we can work our way out of this together.
Who did you look to for that support?
That's a great question. I think if I reflect on Dig and the co-founders, we all were very lucky that our parents came from grassroots leadership. They all did things in their own right in our community. So when we were newly founded, we really looked to our close family. And, we took guidance from them, direction from them, and positive reinforcement from them. But as we continue to build and grow, I think the most beautiful thing, and this is why community control works, is that people naturally want to see it succeed. They don't want to see people fail in community. So as you continue to grow, people who have always been around other organizations and around the community, they take notice. And then suddenly, at a time and a place when you've hit the next roadblock in your growth, you've got this person that just magically appears. And they're actually the exact person and the exact knowledge and the exact guidance that, as a young people, as an up-and-coming organization, people looking for more experience and determination to keep on going, they're the exact people you need to say, take a step back, pull your head up, you can do this, let's do it together.
I really like how you kind of explain that the information comes when it's needed. And, I feel like in Te Ao Māori, we have a very intuitive way of being, and our tupuna are always around us, and they guide us, and they will connect us to the right knowledge at the right time and the right people, and I've definitely found that in my experience, that I've even kind of in passing with my kind of iwi leaders. I'll bump into them randomly in Wellington. They're all supposed to be back up north. And I remember that happened once. And I was running the Wellington Pride Festival at the time. And I kind of just asked him, we bumped into each other at a bar randomly. And I was like, what's something you're learning recently? And he kind of said that, sometimes you can have the vision and you can have all of this knowledge and how to get somewhere. Sometimes you're not the one to explain that to others. And sometimes the people can't be convinced. And therefore, the iwi, the organization, can't move to where you want it. And you just kind of have to accept that. And that kind of resonated with me at the time with the festival. Trying to get it somewhere. I just had to kind of back off and be like, cool, we're here where we are. Let's just kind of continue as we are. And and I feel like my kind of journey through governance has been the same throughout, even encountering the kind of octopus model Te Whiki for governance, getting stuck within all of the Western frameworks and the Incorporated Societies Act, and you do have to tick all the boxes. But then it's like, well, where do I put my culture in all of that? It's where it connects with the people, with the land, with other organizations. And so, that intuition, would you say you're quite an intuitive person?
I would say yes. I think it's kind of like you say, you get to a point where it's just like, this is where it's at and this is it, and it's either going to progress or it's not. But regardless, we've gotten to this point. And it's a very beautiful thing when I think as an organization, you are doing the right thing. You get reinforcement that you are doing the right thing and you are working towards the right things when it does get stressful and when the compliance of the organization is actually way bigger than what you're actually trying to do. And then suddenly someone steps out of the blue and it's almost like they just turn up and there's light shining around them. Then you're just like, thank you. Because it was like, we didn't know you existed or whatever thing, but for whatever reason, we managed to cross paths at the optimal moment to actually create meaningful and tangible connection. And through that connection, actually helps either solve our problems or support us through issues, or even just create more opportunities. And, you can touch many things on that, but intuition, the guidance from our ancestors, our connection to our country and our people, our community, I don't necessarily know what it is, but it's been a very big blessing, that's for sure.
That's my experience, it's the same, using your intuition. And I guess I'd say to young people who are looking at getting into governance is that don't worry about it. Your tupuna got you. Your ancestors have got you. You'll be given what you need when you need it, not a moment sooner, unfortunately, because, it'll be nice to have it right at the beginning.
Wow.
Just get involved.
And it's going to be ours. And it's going to be ours to hold soon anyway, regardless of whether we like it or not. It's going to be ours to hold. So we should be encouraging each other to step into these phases now where we have the safety and guidance of our eldership and our leaders. So we can actually step into them into the future and be those elders and leaders for the next generation.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. The time is now. It's already arrived. We needed to be doing it yesterday. And so if this isn't going to end up in a dumpster fire, we need to step up. I think the barriers that I can see, though, is kind of our attention being harvested, on our phones, and wage slavery. I think those are the two biggest kind of barriers that I can see in New Zealand for young people engaging in governance. Is just our time is becoming less and less that we have for it.
And then there's also the pressure of not only the load of leadership that if you reflect on in many of the non-Indigenous organizations and Western organizations, there is an extreme pressure on leadership there. But then when you step into this community space, or this community control space, we like to call it here, is there's also that immense cultural load that we also do carry. And very soon, not only are they responsible for looking after an organization or sitting on a few different boards and committees, they're also holding the relationships with communities. And we all know how hard it is to build those relationships with communities, but also how quickly it is for those relationships to deteriorate. And that is a part of the cultural load, of the stress of we want to support our communities. And we've got to make good decisions, because just as quickly as we get there, it can disappear.
Yeah. I really like that. I heard it the other day. Trust leaves on a galloping horse, but it comes back at a walk. And so those relationships matter. And I think that's one thing that I kind of have focused on with the organizations that I've been in, is kind of making sure that the organization has good relationships. But I think one of my learnings as well is that if I step away, do the relationships last? How are they within the organization? And all of those questions. How does an organization maintain relationships with people, or other relationships with other organizations, with government? It's complex.
So complex. Thank you for sharing, Taylor. I really do appreciate that. Now, Taylor, it'd be really interesting to hear from you, especially about your perspective of how our organizations, our community control organizations, can make space for young people in this space of governance and leadership. And what sort of, when we talk about make space, what does that make space actually look like?
I think that's a great question. And I like to go back to, why aren't young people there already? Asking those questions, and what are the biases that mean that there's not a whole bunch of young people lining up at the door? It's easy to kind of say, oh, young people don't have time. But do young people even know you exist? Is your board easy to access? Are they allowed to be young people on your board?
Is it safe?
Is it safe? Absolutely, especially within takatapui spaces. Is it respectful? Yeah, I would be answering all of those questions as an organization first, and then naturally young people might just appear. As opposed to, I think it's too easy for an organization to allow a young person to be there, or allow a Māori person to be there, because they've got to tick we've got a young person and now we've got a Māori person, and then you're not allowed to be Māori or young. Mm-hmm. And so I think answering those biases first. What would your answer to that be?
Yeah, you touched on that a bit earlier about the not allowance to be Māori, or not allowance to be young. And I think that's a big one. Same over here, that it's gone to the point. So for DIG, for us, we've advocated, and we got our constitution of our organisation changed to recognise that while we're a young organisation now, we are also getting older. But in our governance structure, we created space for 2 recognised youth governance board members. So as long as our constitution stands, and our members endorse it, we will always have it mandatory that at least 2 of our positions have to be under the age of 30. And that allows some great space, and that is a bit of peace of mind that we can also then invite some older, more experienced people from our communities to come sit on our boards. But also that we're always ensuring that we have young people in this space. They are, just because they are the youth, there's the youth board member position, doesn't mean you can't be under 30 to apply. It's just saying that we have to have at least 2 at all times in our organisation. And it really empowers them to say, well, I can be a young person on this board and I can still learn, and I can sit in this from a perspective of observership in a way, but I am still a decision maker.
So how would you navigate kind of accountability to elders whilst also bringing your own young perspective?
I think in this way, this is where the youth board position actually is a really beautiful fit. because what we've done is we've created the space that is for us in these boardrooms, in these committees, in these governance structures. I reflect on my own experience of applying and standing on boards, and some people said, no, Bob, you're right, your time will come. I'm like, well, I'm standing here because my time's now, like, and I want to also sit in this position because you're here too. I want to sit next to you and learn and be guided by. I don't want to be sitting here in 5 years' time when your knowledge is not here anymore and your support's not here anymore. And I think we also got to recognize that. And as we step into our own eldership, and the people listening, as we step into our own eldership, I think it's very important that we also have that little bit of a seed sitting in the back of our head. How are we going to be when we're in these positions? And we have to be the ones to say, well, I actually got to give up this seat of power or this responsibility or, this opportunity and allow it for the next generation. Not because of that they can't do it, but because we need them to do it. I don't know. It's a challenging one, but we need the buy-in from our elders and our mentors and our leaders to support us to take these roles, because we want to do it while they're still here and we want their support while we do it. We don't want to go against them. They're our cultural, intellectual property. They're our leaders, our law keepers, our guides. We want them to be there and watch us take these positions.
Yeah. I think in Te Ao Māori we have a tuakana teina model. So that's an older sibling and a younger sibling. And you have the older and the younger, but each of them bring their own perspective and are needed. So you don't necessarily have one above the other. It's kind of like next to each other. And so when I've been in Pākehā spaces, it's not quite been the case. But in my Māori spaces, it definitely is. And I think my thinking and kind of understanding of governance and leadership has definitely been shaped by those who are older than me that I've worked with and done life with as well, and it kind of comes to that. They need each other. And I guess the pressing thing is, do we have the time to do it? We're running out of time, The time is now, as we've kind of mentioned.
The time is now, and absolutely. And I think it kind of leads into the fact of, well, the time is now, and we're at the most efficient point we've ever been in terms of running organizations, but we're also at the same time the most time poor and attention poor. I would be interested if I flip that on the switch and I go to values and knowledge as well. And as our communities and our culture evolve, let's just say, for a common word sense, from your experience, how is your community-controlled organisations, your non-for-profits, holding those values and that knowledge? And how has that been carried forward?
Through connections. I don't see values as stagnant. They're living. They live in us as people. And I think that ensuring that you stay connected to every generation and to your intuition, to your ancestors, I think is really important to ensure that you're moving with them. I think there's this kind of an ideology from the West that knowledge is obtained and it's stagnant because it lives in books. We're an oral tradition, and so that makes it more alive, and it doesn't stay stagnant. It does move. And so I think it's really important to maintain those relationships, because that is the knowledge, that is the connection to knowledge. And one day, yes, you're not going to have them, because as you say, they're going to pass on. And that's where we look to those with us with the highest intuition, I guess, at that point, to be like, talk to our tupu now. What are we up to now?
You're so right, though, because the connection that we have is, there's one thing that colonization has never been able to take from us, and that's our connection to our culture and our connection to each other. And they're our two strongest suits. And what we know in our way of doing, in our governance models, is that they do work and they are efficient and they are actually starting to be adopted by Western practices. And they realize, the way community control health works in Australia is actually a very good model, and it's cheaper than what our mainstream health services operate in. And you'll probably see the same over in New Zealand as well, because what we're doing is we're taking away all the pressure around the person, and we're focusing on the person itself and that human-centered care, because that human is connected to our community and that human is connected to us, and we need to ensure that we're supporting them the best way possible.
I would say that that's definitely the case here in New Zealand as well. I know that Runga Māori, Māori healing practitioners, had the uptake of them through ACC, our kind of injury, those who control injury in New Zealand. The uptake by Pākehā and Māori is 50-50, and the outcomes are great on both sides. And like you say, cheaper. Shouldn't be cheaper. We should pay them more. But it's definitely, it has better outcomes, and it has, I would say better outcomes, it says good outcomes. Yeah. And so I think as well, what works for Māori across many sectors works for everyone, because it's just, it's human. It includes relationships.
That's a really beautiful thing. I would like to ask you this question, and when we talk about the responsibilities young leaders carry, what does it mean to maintain that cultural legitimacy in these governance models, and as these governance models kind of change and adapt?
I guess what we just said, stay connected. I think in New Zealand, well, even for my own journey, I was in this governance space and kind of had a break, and I was going to kind of find my own, reconnect with my own iwi and whakapapa, my ancestry. And I kind of thought that was a side project. I'll quickly go and kind of find my connections, and then I'll get back on track. And what I found actually was, as I moved that way, that became the way. And it's actually a really successful way. And now I'm really connected to my iwi, and I guess there's more depth and richness in all of the spaces that I'm a part of, because for me, Te Ao Māori comes with quite a bit of depth, and a lot of the words kind of double up meanings in all sorts of spaces, and you can see how our tupuna thought and how they connected words in particular ways. So yeah, I would say go to find your whakapapa, and you'll actually find that there's a lot more to be found. Were you raised with your kind of Indigenous roots, or was that something you came to later? What did that look like?
It's a very interesting conversation, because the ones that more and more of our young people are experiencing is, I'm a First Nations man, I've been connected to my family, but I didn't grow up in my country. And that's not by any fault of mine or my parents. It was simply my mother and father had to come to live here in Gimwe because that's where Dad's work was. He was working in the Navy, so he had to go on the Navy boats and go out. And that Cairns became my home. But there's many people in this region that are exactly the same. The Cairns is a cultural hub for all of the Cape, further inwards of Queensland, and the Torres Straits. And there's many different people from all over the communities that call this place home. And we're very fortunate to have our traditional owners, the people that are here, and this is their country, allow us to live and practice and build our families and our communities on this country, because for us, it's been an immense privilege. I think the challenge, though, when you talk about that is, while I've always been connected to my country and my people and my family, you have to recognize that I also have learned to be respectful to the fact of this country that I'm on right now is not mine. And I am welcomed here, and I can call this place, I'm very proud to call this place my home, but it is my country. And there's the respect there of, while I'm connected to country, I'm not of this country. So I think that is a challenge. And when we look at that, we actually do realize that as our people continue to build their own skills and capabilities, they will end up moving, changing, and not everyone will go back to their own country. But as long as they're centered at who they are, and that, as you kind of said before, you went over here to reconnect and learn your culture and your people, and you realized that's actually the grounding for everything I should be doing. I shouldn't be going over here to then come back. If I base everything from this point, regardless of where I am, who I am, or what I stand for, I am centered in my being and my identity, and I can stand tall and be proud of that. So taking those kind of thoughts on, I'm sure as I have, you have as well, how have you balanced respect for cultural authority in these different spaces, and how have you challenged them, or how have you tried to do things differently to ensure that, not only are you centered in what is right, but you're also respecting those differences of opinion, those cultural authorities, and those cultural protocols?
I would say I probably just soak it up whenever I'm around them. So I'm not really put in a position where I conflict, because I think my relationships are good, and I think that matters. And I notice in spaces, more in Pākehā spaces, where my relationships are not good, and then things can break down, and things get tense. When I see young people, especially kind of millennials at the moment, hearing it from a lot of us actually, is kind of, we're the Y generation, and so we kind of ask a bunch of questions, and then we kind of we'll question things when we come into a space, and previous generations may not always find that great. And I think if you're with a solid relationship first, and you've got a solid relationship, those questions aren't adversarial, and they're answered really well, and you kind of supported. Whereas if the relationship doesn't exist and it's not strong, the young person, what I've seen, kind of becomes this adversarial role of, well, why do we do things like that? Why can't we do them like this? Or I think when you're interpreting something, as someone who asks, someone who has a bit more depth, or wants a bit more depth and purpose and meaning to their work, kind of can come across as adversarial. So I think just maintaining good relationships, I think, is really important. How would you answer that? Do you find similar stuff? Or
I really like when you said when the relationship doesn't exist, because it is a challenge. We're stepping into spaces where they're literally the peak of our leaders and our ways of doing, and they're standing there. They're like giants, and suddenly I'm sitting at the same table as them, and I have a different way of doing, or I actually think we should be doing something differently. It's a very raw experience to feel, because you're conflicted around how you should do it. And I think it touches back to when that relationship doesn't exist. And I feel now, and you could probably agree, you sat in enough spaces, but you've also spent the time to build these relationships with your elders and your community members, that once you sit at these spaces, they look at you and they don't see a young person who's inexperienced. They see someone that is willing to fight for the betterment of their community, and they're willing to put themselves out there and have differing opinions to support the improvement of said communities. So it is always very conflicting, and I think there will always be one or two moments in your career where you're kind of sitting there, especially as a young leader stepping into these spaces, where you're sitting there and think, I need to say something. And sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, and that's fine. But if you're ever going to be respected, sometimes you have to kind of step into the goblet of fire and give it a go. And obviously, at all times, you be respectful, you be honest and transparent, but you also do stand up for what you believe in, because at the end of the day, you're in this position because of your skill set, your knowledge, your capabilities. And yes, while there's some very experienced people around the table with you, you shouldn't be afraid of what your sense of right is and how you think you should achieve that.
Yeah, no, I totally. I kind of makes me think at this time. I think it was last year. I was sitting at a dinner table, just having dinner with the chair of my iwi and the chair of a local iwi, and they were discussing AI and how it interacts with Indigenous spaces, and I was like, how did I get here? Oh my gosh, I'm so lucky to like, this is typically this is like front of the way, like we've pulled out in front, and our waka is like, I'm now sitting at the front. Like, how did I even get here? And it was cool just to watch that the conversation was even being had. Yeah, those are spaces that I really love, especially within the Māori health space. It's really cool. I kind of just see it as like a sea of canoes, waka. And then sometimes your waka pulls out in front and you're like, oh my gosh, I now really got to know what I'm up to, because I somehow seem to be here with all of these amazing people and we're doing some amazing things, and there's actually responsibility on me. And I think that's a really cool place to be in. People will find that, and each organization will be doing it in different ways, but it's a really cool feeling. Have you ever had that feeling?
Oh, very much so. I think in this space, and as you continue to grow and you continue to do more, you realize that you see it, you see these opportunities, and then sometimes it goes so fast you don't reflect. But then you sit back and you're like, man, did I just do that? Like, I was literally part of this, and I can see the changes, or I can see the influence of the decisions that I helped make or advised on, or the things that I led. And then you reflect and like, this is what it means. This is actually what it means to be an up-and-coming leader, or just a leader, but as someone who's stepping into these things, actually looking at those successes and thinking, okay, this is why we do it. This is why the people before us have done it. And this is why I will want to continue to be here, continue to do this.
Yeah, I would say that's how young people change the world. By accident, because you were in a space that you felt so uncomfortable with to begin with. And I think you didn't mind.
Yeah, one opportunity. It was 18 at a cafe and they asked you to sit on a board. Look where you are now. Eh? Now, Taylor, it'd be really interesting to get your perspective through your experiences. How have you seen governance evolve over the last 10 or so years?
I wasn't in governance 10 years ago. And I think from our leaders, I don't think you would either. And so I think this is kind of like a discussion for our elders. However, every organization comes with its own history, its own whakapapa, its own connections. And if I look at, say, an organization like ACC, I think what's changed over the last 10 years is that government organizations, and I can see even with local organizations, they've gone from, and even the community organizations that I work with in the nonprofit sector, they've gone from a public good to a funding model. We're talking about funding way more. And I think neoliberal policies of the 80s and 90s have changed these entities, these octopuses that we give birth to, we wake up. They're changing. A lot of agreements that these organizations were founded in an era where everyone kind of was trying to come together and solve problems together and help the community, and we had a collective responsibility. Now we're talking about fiscal responsibility and sustainable management, and I think that's what's changed, is our entities, these octopus, have become really Pākehā, and they were a public good to begin with. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have, maybe it's a two-pronged, and if I don't hit the second one, let me know. But I think I do agree with evolution, and we in Australia have definitely seen that in some of our spaces, especially in macho space, the community-controlled sector, that you start to see, and I won't comment whether it's by necessity or desire, but you have seen that some of our peak bodies have actually turned into funding bodies. So that question of the organizations and peoples that were meant to represent us and advocate for us at the highest levels are now the deciders of whether we continue.
Yeah.
And it's a scary space to be in, because
philanthropic organizations are almost in a power position. And that's not kind of what philanthropy is, I thought. But so many orgs rely on it.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where we also recognize to run and have strong governance in our community-controlled sector, in our not-for-profits, it's expensive and it's hard to do. And not necessarily philanthropy, government funding, fee-for-service. We're trying to do all these things, and you suddenly realize you have to have your finger in 8 different pies to make it sustainable, to have enough money to fund the positions, to make sure that you have strong governance and, controls and security measures. And you got to do all this extra work. And I think we are starting to see a change in how some philanthropists and some government funding look at supporting the core, because recognizing, if these organizations, if this is where they're struggling, either they're going to fold or they're going to find a way. And, we should be putting pressure on our peak bodies. We should be putting pressure on those people that represent our community-controlled sector at the highest levels to say, well, you actually need to either get government to change how they operate, or get them to actually come to the table and start supporting us more, or you come and support us more. So it's an interesting kind of position, that's for sure.
Yeah, I would say that it kind of alludes to your organization doesn't exist in a bubble. It exists in a society, under a government, around other organizations. And I think that any decisions and ideologies that encompass the nation also that you've got to work within, and sometimes they're not conducive to easy helping people. How did helping people become so complicated and hard? It's hard. All this compliance and then finding funding from 22 different places to fund one person's role. That's wild. That's like a lot of effort and time to try and find that money.
You need someone in a position to do that work, right? So it
defeats the purpose.
It's a perpetual cycle. And I think I wanted to just touch back my second point that I wanted to make around how we sometimes now we're feeling more out of touch and more westernized than ever. And it's because when our elders and our leaders started these back in the day, you're right, it was very simple. We want to help people. At DIG, we want to do good. Very simple purpose, very simple rationale. We're going to figure it out. We volunteered for 7 years to build this organization and to grow it. And for us, for kind of leaders at the time that really took mantle, we worked for free for 3 years. My 3 sisters, Stacey, Samara, and Marissa, they all quit their high-paying jobs for 3 years and jumped on government support to be able to make this organization operate. I worked overnights in a hotel, and we did everything we could. Our first employee didn't get paid for a month, because for us to actually have the money in the bank account to pay the employee, we had to complete the contract. To complete the contract, we hadn't had an employee. And that person was the generosity of some of our first staff members, our inaugural staff members who still work in the organization today, that they're willing to take that risk with us. And I think that's the essence of where it stands and where it stems from, is that as organizations grow, the need to support people kind of gets forgotten in the need to be compliant and ensure that governance and high levels of management are there. But what we need to recognize is that these two can coexist, and they need to coexist and be balanced, because just as much as the reason that we're from here is the reason we sustain. So we're here for our community, and we're sustained by high levels of operational governance. And we need to balance these two equally, and we need to know that we're doing it for our community, and we're able to continue to do it for our community because of our strong government and models of care.
Yeah, I would say that that's the role of governance, is to get all that compliance ticked. And I know that one of my aunties, what she said to me, and if we move into the question on how can Indigenous governance, how can our next generation, what is it that we need to protect within governance? And I think I've been given an opportunity in some spaces under good governance to dream. And I don't get to do that in spaces where I have to do all the compliance. And, someone's got to do all of the compliance and say, we've ticked all of these boxes. And now you, people, dream of what this organization can really turn into and be. And it's hard, I think, to hold both roles. But I think good governance can give the dreaming to people. And that dreaming is, because once you don't have to worry about anything getting ticked, the world's your oyster, the sky's the limit. And what would you do in that space? What would your dreaming look like if you didn't have to do compliance and you had a government board that just did it, got all the money, got everything you needed, and now what are you doing tomorrow?
It's a beautiful concept, and it makes me reflect on our earlier days of DIG and our first kind of board that we had assembled. We did a board retreat. So essentially, we all chipped in our little bit of money, and we got an Airbnb. We got big butcher's papers, nose pads, plenty of food, and we workshopped. What do we imagine DIG is going to look like? What do we want? We filled a whole wall with sticky notes, butcher's papers, about what do we want to achieve and what we want to do. And it was a powerful thing, because there was no, if we had this much money, or, if we had this many staff members, or if we had this or that. It's like, what do you envision we could do? We had people there that we were going to have our own, businesses. We were going to run the government. We were going to do all these things. And, in hindsight, you think, okay, well, it was maybe some of the dreams were a bit too big, but the whole point of it doesn't stop us, and we're actually shaping. And these things do live. They continue to live in the minds of the people that continue to hold them. And one of the most powerful things written down was that we want to have our own village. And when I say village, it's a community center for our people. But it's not just us. It's other like-minded organizations who are passionate about serving the community, have strong governance, have strong ways of doing. We want our village to strengthen, because we want a strong ecosystem where people correlate, they touch each other, they are always interconnected and building those strong relations, those strong connections. And that has been something that has been standing with DIG for the last 10 years, that concept of a village. And who are those people in our village that are also doing like-minded things? And how can we bring them together and bring us together to make our community stronger?
Have you made good on that? Do you have your village?
I think we're not far.
That's so exciting.
It's a pipeline dream, It's one of those things, but it's that intuition where, there's been people at key points in our journey that has supported us in coming to these points, and it may happen, it may eventuate. And I'm very confident of the leadership we have here at DIG, not just in myself, but all the people around an organization and all the people external to the organization support us, that, one day that's going to be a reality for us. And then it's up to us to ensure that we hold true to our community, our word to our community, around what that village stands for and what it means. So obviously lots of responsibility, but lots of opportunity.
Oh, definitely. I think it's cool that you say that, because I know that working across the nonprofit sector, Volunteer Wellington, we have somewhat of a bird's eye view across the sector within our city and our areas and our suburbs. And I was a part of the team who created a networking event for nonprofits in Lower Hutt, which is kind of one half of the city. And yeah, I can see that turning into, like, I wish that we would somehow get funding, because I can see everyone needs to hire an office space. Everyone needs to have access to each other, that we kind of pass people to whoever they need to, who's best suited. But doing that across an entire city is just difficult. Whereas if there's this hub, like this village, like you say, where if you do need governance support here, like everyone like can book your governance room and we can have people come support you, do it at different times, you know, kind of there's your boardroom, everyone, for like 30 organizations, you know. I think the village and having that space where these entities can exist allows people to not pay all this rent, and you can actually fund going out to the community as well a bit easier, but still have a base.
But also encourage community to engage with you. For our community members, we have the space there for cultural practice. If they want to do a kapmari or a hangi, there, the pit's there. You know what I mean?
Cool. Yeah,
and
yeah,
you want to come dance, the space is there. The community then recognize that this is a place where they can feel supported in, they can feel encouraged to embrace it. Because not only are there all these amazing, strong organizations there wrapping around supports, they're also opening up, encouraging the community to also engage and strengthen that village, strengthen that community, strengthen that connection and identity, because that's what it's all about. It's about that connection, that interrelationality, that ways of doing that. You know, the Western societies look at us and think, oh, you do that differently, but you might think that, but what we do actually works. And this is living evidence of that.
Yeah, for sure. It's cool that it's the relational aspect, I think, always comes back to that. And it'd be cool to see our cities, instead of a central business district, had a central community district, you know, like what we're talking about. Recreational stuff there, all sorts, you know. That would be the dream. Imagine, like, how sad is it for young people to wish for community instead of what we have, you know?
Yeah, like, and I think that really touches on, I know we've kind of talked, like, what we've kind of talked about. Where do you think the Indigenous governance is going to go into the next generation, and what do you think we need to hold on to? Is it that connection? I know we've touched on the word of connection a lot, but what do you think needs to be protected and kind of held true as we continue to evolve?
I would think, for me, protecting the history of what other people have set for us. You know, like when it's our turn to inherit these organizations that have helped a lot of people for generations, we can't drop the ball, you know. But I think there's definitely room to make them more relational. And it may mean that we get pulled into politics because we need to change the system and the environment in which our organizations sit. You know, I think they kind of go hand in hand at this point, you know, where a lot of organizations are kind of building providing ambulances at the bottom of the cliff. We need to get to the top of that cliff and build a fence, you know?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of young people within the protest space, which I think is fantastic. And I don't see them too far from governance. You know, I think we're all interconnected in the spaces that we're working. What do you think would?
I think that you're pretty bang on the money in many ways, and I think that what we're seeing more advocates in our community, people who are passionate about the injustices that we see for our community members, and they're willing to step up and make a stand. And when we talk about governance, that is a framework of strong governance, because those people are willing to make change, and they're willing to fight for it, and they're willing to stand. And in our ways of doing that is the most important thing we could ever embrace. When I think about what needs to be protected, it's that connection to our identity. And we must never lose the fact of who we are representing in these spaces, and that's our community first and foremost, and our people, our forefathers, our mothers that fought for us to get to this point. So we need to often have that time of knowing our history, because we don't want our history to repeat itself. We don't want government or our westernized kind of organizations to start putting their fingers on stuff that we've built for so long and our forefathers have built for so long, and let them destroy it or wreck it or make it lose the direction and the inherent beauty that it held because of what they did to build it. So that's kind of where, when I look to the future, the biggest thing is, because I know these ecosystems, these processes, these governance structures, they work, and they work well. And we can't allow other people to come in and destroy that, either because they don't want to see us succeed, or they're trying to copy it and imitate it without doing the proper practice of in letting us invite them in, and letting us invite them in to learn and observe.
Yeah, I think it's that I see our Indigenous cultures have a lot of depth to them, and you can't just replicate what you see. It's got to be felt. And I think that's the big part, is kind of including our bodies in governance. I know that in Te Ao Māori, we do our pepeha, we introduce ourselves, and it can take a long time, and I think that's the part that is most dissonant with the more Pākehā mindset. But what's actually happening during that time is our bodies are learning to emotionally regulate around each other. And my mind can kind of think at the speed of light, but it takes my hand to get from here to here. Time. The body is measured in time. And so I think if things take longer, it's because we're including our bodies now. And I think that's a really important aspect to, I know my Māori culture, I'm not sure, does your Indigenous culture include your body a lot more than a Western perspective?
Yeah. The grounding, the connection to our country and our bodies is so important. You know, I think that feeling, that intuition, that feeling, and that no good feeling in your heart when you think,
yeah,
is this right? Is this wrong? We got to trust it. That intuition is so powerful for our people. Our people have been ripped off for generations, and we have a chance to continue to not allow that to happen. In many ways, people before us have done the same, but we got to take that mantle on and continue that and continue to go strong. And I think you're right. It's that slow down, because we're only as fast as our community allows us to go as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's been epic chatting with you, and you will have to tell me when that village becomes a thing, because I will come and visit.
We would love you to come across, have a look, stay a little while,
Yeah, that'd be great.
More than welcome in our space, and it's been an absolute pleasure to spend the last hour talking with you, Taylor.
Yeah. Go well, and yeah, your community sounds like they're very, very lucky to have you.
Thank you very much. Have a good one, bro. Nice to see you.
Cheers. Ka kite.